Julie shouted at me as I packed my bags. OMG, you aren't seriously going with him. What kind of freak adopts a 16-year-old? He must be a psycho. I don't know, maybe the universe is finally smiling down on me. I couldn't tell if my best friend Julie was actually scared of the eccentric man waiting for me in a limo, or if she was just jealous I was getting adopted by a billionaire. I assured her I was just a phone call away and I was going to be okay. I was not prepared for the life ahead of me, though. I should have known there was something off about the man. See, just a week ago, I saw a disheveled old man crying in the park. All I did was ask him if he was okay, and he gave me a huge hug. I thought he was homeless, so I offered him a chocolate bar from my purse. He ate it so messily, I thought he hadn't eaten in days. He insisted he would make it up to me. I told him not to worry about it. The very next day at school, one of my classmates started shouting at us to look out the window. There was a huge banner. It said, "To the girl who gave some chocolate to the homeless-looking man in the park yesterday, please call this number as soon as possible." All of my classmates were asking questions. I was going to call the number myself after school, but my principal called me into the office a few minutes later. There, waiting in the chair, was the man from the day before. He wanted to thank me for everything and didn't know how else to find me. You could have tried Facebook. Sorry, I don't know how to use that. I don't know what I was thinking, but I agreed to let him take me out as a thank you for the chocolate bar. I agreed to meet him outside of the orphanage after school. For sure, I did not expect a limo to pick me up. Well, here we are a week later, and I'm driving to our mansion. It was bigger than I ever could have imagined. Mr. Conrad gave me a tour of the whole house. It was as eccentric as he was. There were a few indoor gardens, a shark tank, and my room had a tree in it. That was probably my most normal day at the mansion. One night, after I said I liked Dumbo, he showed up to dinner riding a small elephant. It broke about $2 million in fancy china and stained glass windows, but he kept saying it was worth it just to see me smile. He was trying so hard to make me happy. As soon as I moved into the mansion, I was moved to the fancy private school of my dreams. I was really nervous on my first day. Mr. Conrad saw that I'd hardly touched my breakfast. He leaned over and smiled. "Don't worry, everyone is going to love you." Turned out, the teachers were super nice, and the kids were really welcoming too. I was getting along just fine with everybody when suddenly, in the third class of the day, Mr. Conrad burst into the classroom with a big box. "The latest Apple Watches for everyone, from our sweet, sweet Dana." All the kids oohed and awed with excitement as he hopped around the class, handing everyone their watches. They looked really happy, but I was so embarrassed. I really didn't need his help to win everyone over. I really started enjoying going to school and everything was perfect, except for one other student, Amber. Amber was the heiress to some tech company. She was the richest girl in school until I got there. She was super annoying and threatened by the fact that I was richer than her. She was always making jokes about me being an orphan or not knowing about the latest fashion trends. This one time, I thought she was being nice and gave me a gift basket full of free jewelry and clothes. I was so confused why she was laughing. I thanked her for the gift and she started pointing and laughing with tears in her eyes. Those are from last season. OMG. That night, I called Julie and told her about it. Julie and I thought Amber was the weirdest, meanest girl ever. I mean, the basket was worth more than $80,000. I could live with it. I found it all so stupid and funny and loved telling Julie about how the stupid rich girl was trying to get me today. Most of the time, it just involved giving me a bunch of free stuff that I gave to Julie later when I visited her at the orphanage. I told Julie today, Amber told me, I bet she doesn't know a Gucci bag from a Coach purse, and handed me a bunch of free handbags. Mr. Conrad overheard me talking to Julie about my problems with Amber, and he immediately offered to help. I told him it was okay. I was doing fine with it all. I can buy her father's company. That'll show her. I told him I appreciated it, but I was used to doing things my way, and ruining her life because she made fun of my clothes seemed a little extreme. I told him that teenage girls can get catty. He gave me a really weird smile and said he heard me loud and clear. I probably should have asked what he meant. The next day at school, Amber came up to me in the courtyard and started making jokes about my shirt while I was talking to this guy Xander. All I did was ask, "What are you gonna do? Give me free clothes? That'll show me." Xander and I laughed, and Amber got very red in the face. Amber asked him why he was hanging out with a loser like me and how he could have a real girl like her. Before I could say a word to her, I heard something I'd never heard before in my entire life. Amber screamed and ran, and I dropped my book and fell over. Xander went running in the opposite direction. It was Mr. Conrad and a tiger. Everyone was staring at us with a mix of horror and confusion. He laughed and said, "Get it? Because girls are catty? Where did you even get that?" "Oh, I had a buddy fly her in from Hollywood. She's harmless. Look, I can ride her like a king." Then he said to the tiger, "Roar, babe, roar." And the tiger roared and rubbed his knee with her head. He looked so ridiculous, and everyone was laughing at him, except for me. I was a little upset he'd managed to scare Amber and Xander away. I guess that's how parents are supposed to be. Mr. Conrad did a lot for me, and it was going to take more than almost feeding my enemy to a tiger to get me to be mad at him. But when Julie visited, she didn't find it as funny as I did. Julie said, "He brought a live tiger to school, Dana. Are you even safe?" I told her that I was, and everything was okay. But she kept pushing me. "Yeah, it's great and all that. You go to the Bahamas every month and have a private jet. But do you ever get to be a real teenager?" I told her to mind her own business, and it was super obvious that she was just jealous. Julie looked hurt and said, "Who are you?" Then she left before I could even apologize. I felt bad immediately. I'd never thought about it, but Julie was right. At my old school, I always had friends. I had plans every weekend and was constantly asked out on dates. At my new school, it seemed like everyone avoided me now. Mr. Conrad had made me an outcast, but I assured her he was just doing normal rich dad things. Deep down, I knew though, he took it to some incredible extremes. One night, I'd stayed up really late doing homework and went to school feeling like a zombie. I was really tired and my limo driver was late, so this guy from school offered to drop me home. Boy, I would have said no if I knew what was waiting for us at the gates. Mr. Conrad saw us and yelled, "Who are you? And what are you doing with my daughter?" He pulled a bunch of crazy-looking interrogation tools out of his briefcase. I managed to pry him away long enough to explain that I was just tired and a boy from class had offered me a ride home. He went from treating the boy like a criminal to treating me like a hospital patient. He whipped out a flashlight and asked me to follow his finger and if I was dizzy and if I thought someone had poisoned me. Without even waiting for a reply, he hopped in the boy's car and drove us all to the hospital. It was so embarrassing. I didn't think it was ever worth bringing a boy into my life again. That was until Xander. After that boy told the whole school how intense Mr. Conrad was, everyone avoided me like the plague, all except for Xander. He literally brought me a bouquet of flowers just in case it was more than a lack of sleep. How cute! I decided I wanted a boyfriend, and I wanted Xander to ask me out. I knew he was the one. I just needed to avoid Mr. Conrad finding out. Xander had seemed super interested in me before, but after the tiger incident, he got more distant, although I could feel he was still into me by the lovely looks he gave me and his warm smile. So I decided to make the first move. I really tried to drop some hints, like I was pretty embarrassing sometimes. Once I put on a bunch of makeup, walked up to him, and told him I was very available this weekend and had no plans at all. His response? "Me too. Hope you find something to do." Amber hopped over, hung all over him, and said, "Hey Xander, look how desperate she is for a date with you." Thanks again to Amber's bad attitude, he immediately ran up to me. "You mean you really want to date?" Mr. Conrad made it seem like he was a little overprotective. I don't want to mess with a guy with a tiger. What? No, he wants me to date super badly. Well, only if your dad's okay with it. That's when I finally got asked out on a date, and Amber was fuming. I know I said Mr. Conrad was cool with it, but the guy brought a tiger to school because a girl gave me free clothes. I decided to keep Xander a secret, just for a bit. And only tell Mr. Conrad when the time was right. Until then, I told him I was visiting Julie for the night. He insisted on flying us out to France or letting us use his yacht, but I insisted we just wanted a fun, girls-only evening at the orphanage. I drove down to the city and met Xander at a comic convention. It was the easiest way for us to have fun while keeping my secret. We hit it off super well. He was a little weirded out that I made us wear costumes, but figured it was just a fun Comic-Con thing. Our date went so well that we decided to go on even more. We couldn't dress up in costumes every weekend, so I needed to find ways to be creative. Every time, I convinced Xander to go somewhere far away or in disguises, and every time, I told Mr. Conrad I was meeting Julie. I didn't want Mr. Conrad not to approve of Xander. At the same time, Xander was getting super suspicious. We always had our date in remote places, and I would never kiss him in public. The more serious we got, the harder it was to hide. Xander wanted to post pictures of us on social media and wanted to go to events together. I made excuses to avoid every real public appearance, and it all became more and more awkward. Even though we were official, I was even weird about us hanging out after school, just in case Mr. Conrad made a surprise visit. One time, he tried to run up and kiss me as Mr. Conrad dropped me off, and I instinctively spilled tea on his coat to distract him. Amber saw us and ran up to us laughing. Oh, wow. Some girlfriend you got there, Xander. I told her to shut up and go steal someone else's man. Amber got angry and pointed out how I was acting like Mr. Conrad didn't know we were dating. You just don't want to piss Daddy off, you spoiled baby. I swear I was about to punch her, but then Xander interrupted and said, "That's crazy because Mr. Conrad does know about us. Right, Dana?" I quickly changed the subject, but it was obvious it had gotten to Xander. The final straw came when I showed up to our date wearing a long trench coat, giant sunglasses, and a huge hat. I told Xander it was the latest fashion, but he stared at me with a hurt look. Are you embarrassed of me because my family is only millionaires? I assured him it was all fine and told him I was just nervous about telling Mr. Conrad. He was perfect and I loved him just the way he was. He said with a broken voice, "Then why do you want to hide me?" I tried to explain how Mr. Conrad was a little sensitive and I wasn't sure how he would respond to everything. He told me that he wasn't some secret. He wanted to be a part of my life. I told him that I would slowly introduce him to the important people in my life. I decided to take us out on a double date to introduce him to my best friend. The next day, Mr. Conrad asked if I wanted to join him on a weekend trip, but I told him I couldn't. I told him I was seeing Julie again, which wasn't a total lie. I just left out the part that we were on a double date. He seemed hurt, but understanding. He said he felt like I was always going over there, and he hardly saw me anymore. He explained she was always welcome to come here, but I insisted that I liked visiting the old orphanage. "You really miss her, don't you?" He gave me a huge hug and told me to have fun. I kind of felt guilty leaving him and lying, but I would tell him about Xander soon enough. I called Julie and apologized for what I said. She forgave me and was happy I was enjoying a bit of a normal life with Xander. Julie was so excited about our double date. Julie, her boyfriend, Xander, and I met up at the train station. We went to a small cafe far away from the mansion. It was all going really well, and we decided to show Xander around the town I grew up in. Everything was going perfectly fine until we decided to take a walk in the park. Wow, is this like a special festival or something? There shouldn't be. There were crowds of people on the street. It was like someone was throwing a parade. There were fireworks, singers, and to top it all off, a giant float with a picture of me and Julie that said, "Best Sisters Forever." On the top of that float was Mr. Conrad. I tried to cover my face, but it was too late. Mr. Conrad hopped off the boat and ran over to us cheerfully. He looked genuinely surprised to see me with a boy, and his face dropped when he realized Julie and I weren't alone. "I thought this was girls' evening." I explained I was too nervous to tell him I had a date, and I didn't mean to lie. He started crying and ran off. I felt horrible. As good as my date with Xander was going, I needed to take care of this. I insisted that everything was okay and I would call them all in the morning. "Sorry, Xander, it's just family problems." Xander said it was fine and that I should fix things with Mr. Conrad first. I ran to apologize to Mr. Conrad, but he kept trying to get me to go back to Xander and said I didn't need to apologize. "But I lied to you, and now you're crying." "It's not you, it's me. If I don't need to apologize, then what's the problem?" He explained he was just so happy to see me pursuing love and happiness. He said he was too busy working and never had kids, and by the time he realized he wanted them, he was too old. He explained that he didn't want to die alone, and the world smiled on him when I came into his life. He wanted to give me everything he had and more. Why did you come here anyway? I figured you missed Julie so much, it made sense to adopt her too. My offer still stands if you want. That week, our mansion got a little more crowded. We had a party, and Mr. Conrad brought 2 golden statues of me and Julie hugging each other and put them on our outdoor water fountain. Julie and I loved living in the mansion. Mr. Conrad got us into some crazy adventures, but it was always fun together. Xander and Julie's boyfriend even joined us in some of our antics. I don't think Mr. Conrad will ever worry about dying alone again. I don't think the mansion is ever empty.